Vegas Raiders 17, Denver Broncos 16. Jimmy Garoppolo leading the fourth quarter comeback against the Broncos. It was looking different early on. Hey, Russ is looking good and putting points on the board in Denver. It's 13-10 at the half, but you kind of had this similar drop-off for Denver like you got last year. Like, Russ wasn't bad from start to finish last year. He had these little chunks of good play within games. It was the sustaining a full game that almost, I think, kind of crept back again in this one.
I mean, look, just like everybody expected, the Raiders are now in sole possession of first place in the AFC West.
We did all, yeah, that's right. We did all expect that.
Like everybody said it was going to be. Kansas City, bottom of the division, maybe.
Is it oversimplifying to say that the Giants and the Vikings had all those one-score wins go in their favor last year and the Raiders didn't, and maybe this year the Raiders are going to win their one-score games?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is oversimplifying.
Let me just say, we talk a lot about Jimmy Garoppolo on the show and his limitations and everything. I thought he played really well in this game. He had a pass that snuck through in the red zone that went off, I think it was Jacoby Myers' hands. That was just a really good tight window throw in the red zone that he didn't get credit for. But he's got the scramble on 3rd and 7 to kind of seal the deal. Jimmy Garoppolo does just enough to win. Still, he played really well in this game. He played well. He's just going to be this fascinating case because I've said before here, the analytics community will hate me, but QB wins over time probably get you there directionally. And Garoppolo has always won a ton of games. He was in the Shanahan system and everything. I'm just wondering if he's going to be that difference maker here for the Raiders. I'm not saying it's there in week 1. I'm just something to keep an eye on here. Made some plays in the fourth quarter and played a really nice game for the Raiders.
Yeah, he did. He played well. He got hurt almost immediately, and you're like, God, this is like every time he takes off scrambling, you're like, don't stop. Hit the ground, slide when you have 7 yards of open space in front of you. Don't let anybody get anywhere near you because you're about to hurt yourself.
And then I wasn't sure what to expect because I wasn't keeping track on the Raiders' backup QB situation. I was like, is Aiden O'Connell coming in?
Really missed a trick there.
Brian
Aiden O'Connell could have come in, thrown one big-time throw, and gone back to the bench and maintained his record of just ridiculous positive play. But no, we got Brian Hoyer instead.
A couple guys to highlight for the Raiders. When we were previewing the season and you look at the defensive depth chart for the Raiders, it's like, man, how is this going to work? It's Max Crosby and nobody. Max Crosby looked like a star again yesterday, all over the field making plays. And then sometimes when you're watching on first run, you see a guy like a linebacker. It feels like this linebacker's all over the place. And then you go back and look at the PFF grade, and it's not that great because, again, there's a lot of misplays that you just don't see on broadcast. But Divine Diablo, just want to give him a shout-out for the Raiders. Number 5 was everywhere in this game. And the grade actually matched up overall. 90.7 coverage grade, it looks like it's going to be. But Divine Diablo made a lot of plays. So I was impressed by the Raiders defense and, getting some decent performances, of course, by Crosby, but Nate Hobbs played well. Divine Diablo making a ton of plays at linebacker.
Yeah, shout out as well to Jacorian Bennett, the rookie corner, who ends up basically playing the whole game. He's entrenched as a starter now. Didn't have the best game in the world, but like he's come from a pretty low draft spot to be a starting corner for this team. This game featured one of the best one-on-one matchups of the week. Patrick Surtain, PS2, against Davante Adams.
Oh, twice a year, man. It's
and Adams is, up until now in the NFL, Adams has sort of won those battles. Like we've kind of come out of those games and Adams has been like, still got a little bit of way to go, young pup. Like, you're not quite there yet. I think Surtain won this one. Like, Surtain had a few pass breakups, 3 of them, I think, forced incompletions. I think generally had the beating of Davante Adams, even with, Jimmy Garoppolo playing well and Adams still looking like Adams.
But then you see in exchange for, hey, we can't just feed Davante Adams 15 targets because of that. It's Jacoby Myers, who we mentioned earlier in the show is a perfect number 2 receiver. He gets 2 touchdowns. He's got the fade for a touchdown. Jacoby Myers runs good routes. He gets open. He got absolutely popped later in the game by Kareem Jackson. Did not love that play at all. But again, I think the Raiders have done a nice job building their playmakers. Austin Hooper had a ridiculous catch that maybe should have been incomplete. But Jacoby Myers is really good number 2. right? When he's the number one in New England, not that he's always the one, but, if you're relying on him too much, but there's games like this where you feed him 10 targets because it makes sense. There's going to be other games where Devontae Adams goes off and, teams aren't taking him away and they're not doubling him or they don't have a Surtain, and Adams will get his 15 targets, he'll get his 150 yards. But when he's not there, when he's taken away, you have a Jacoby Myers to step up. So that's a lot of money for Jacoby Myers, but it paid off in this one, at least for the Raiders.
No, absolutely.
Thoughts on Russell Wilson? Because he looked sharp. He completed a lot of passes. Looked sharp early on, 79% completions at the end of the day. He finishes 27 for 34, but for just a $177. So I thought early on Russell Wilson looked pretty good. Looked much more comfortable than he did last year. But by the end of the game, it's getting close, and the Broncos just they were not able to get into this rhythm offensively. And it felt like this is weird, right? Too quick to check down, too quick to throw the short stuff for Russell Wilson. That's not his game.
But this was one where I thought Russ looked more like old Russell Wilson. And for the first time in Denver, you actually got the feeling that he was being let down by the players he was throwing to. Not necessarily because they weren't making plays, but simply because they're not good. And he didn't trust anybody to be open. Reasonably realistically so. Like, little Jordan Humphrey had 25 receiving snaps in this game.
I mean,
when that's a starting option for you, you have problems.
Unfortunately, the injuries with Jerry Jeudy being out, Tim Patrick out for the season,
they didn't promote Marvin Mims, which a lot of people thought they would do sort of heading into the season, that, I guess without those guys, Mims is going to be a full-time starter and be, the primary target next to Courtland Sutton. That didn't happen. He only played like 15 snaps or 10 receiving snaps. So
3 targets, 1 negated by penalty. Yeah.
Right, like Courtland Sutton was the primary target, the only sort of guy you would trust. But look at just list the receivers in terms of number of passing snaps. Courtland Sutton, number 1 guy, fine. Little Jordan Humphrey, number 2. Adam Troutman at tight end, number 3. Brandon Johnson, wide receiver, number 4. Like, that's not enough. A passing game is not going to function with that as your receiving core. So we've gone from this weird world where Russ is going to cook because look at all these receivers he's got in Denver, to like, how can Russ cook because of these receivers in Denver? They only have Courtland Sutton, and even Courtland Sutton hasn't really shown that he can be that true superstar consistently. And who knows how much injuries have taken away from him in terms of his overall ceiling. So I actually felt for the first time in Denver that this was not Russ's fault.
Yeah, it's just like a weird not a stat line, but like when you break down Russell Wilson's average depth of target's 5.6, and his average time to throw is 2.8. So you've got this low average depth of target, high time to throw. High time to throw usually coincides with throwing the ball down the field. To your point, how much of it is the receivers? But look, I've said I'm a Marvin Mims fan. Like, throw the ball deep to him. Just he should get the Rashid Shaheed treatment, the Khalif Raymond treatment. Like, they deserve 3 or 4 deep shots a game.
Particularly when the receiving core is what I just read out.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no reason he shouldn't be getting more work than that.
Take some shots to Marvin Mims, please, going forward. So, I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't think Russell Wilson's really much of a story in this one.
By the way, the running backs for Denver. I mean, Samaje Perine had a couple of nice plays, particularly in the pass game.
Were really nice.
Javonte Williams looked pretty good.
Yeah.
We're in this weird world of miraculous knee injury recoveries in the last few months across multiple sports. Javonte Williams coming back, breaking 4 tackles, averaging 3 yards per carry after contact. Like, that man's knee should not be functioning right now, and he looks more or less like Javonte Williams.